Welcome to our podcast, Raising Bigs. This is episode 4. In this episode, we're tackling the topic of health and how that can look different for parents and their young adult children. I'm Marcy, and I'm the mom.
I'm Cayd and I'm her kid. And today we're here, like mom said, to talk about the topic of health. I think health is an important one for all of us, both kids, parents, everyone in between. I personally want to be healthy just because I think it helps me enjoy life, enjoy the things I want to do see the things I want to see, participate in just different activities of life. So I think that that's what makes it really important for me. And also, on the other hand, why I want my parents, my friends, my family, my cousins, my grandparents, everyone around me to be healthy is because I like to have people with me to enjoy those experiences as well. There's no point in enjoying life if you can't enjoy it with other people. So I think that that is something that's really important to me as well. And obviously, the definition of health changes over time. It's different between each and every person, and not everyone agrees on what is considered health or healthy. And that there's so many different ways to achieve that, and it looks different for everyone. It looks different for everyone. No one's one person's healthy is not the same as another person's healthy. So today we're just going to speak about how we seek health for ourselves and others, and that's just what we're going to dive into today.
And that's a really important point, Cayd, that the journey looks different for everyone. And I think it is a big topic of conversation, has been in our house as you guys have all gotten older and have had to then take over the navigating. You've all gotten full-time jobs, you have your own health
Mhm.
insurance. And how do we do that and make that transition so that you guys are fully functional, not only
For
on the
sure.
medical side of things, but also with nutrition and movement and your mental health, everything that encompasses health. So
Mhm.
our family's definitely navigated some health challenges over the years, and it's affected each of us in different ways. We will probably do an episode, it might be 2 from now, where we talk a little bit about those challenges that we've had and kind of how that affected both of us and has made health so important to us. I think we both say we've been really changed by those events and are approaching the individual journey, but with our family's full support. So also another really important point we're trying to make today is it's really about supporting each other in your own individual journey. And as you'll hear as we go through today, we're going to talk mostly about Cade's most recent journey. He hasn't been a full-fledged adult for very long,
Mhm.
and so kind of how he's taken that over and what that looks like. So I want to be healthy because I want to be around for my kids and my husband and my extended family and my friends. My grandmothers both lived into their 90s, and I fully expect to do the same. So the environment we are living in now, our foods, the knowledge base we have, all of that has changed dramatically. I had one set of grandparents that were farmers, and so pretty much everything they ate either came out of the barn or out of the garden. And there wasn't a lot of processed food. And I remember them eating things now that we really limit in our diet that were part of their normal everyday diet, but yet they lived into their 90s. So we are navigating different times. Things are always changing. But I want to be healthy because I want to be around for those I love. And I want my kids, especially, to be healthy because I do want them to be able to follow their dreams. We talk a lot in our house about what their visions are for their future, what their dreams are for their life, but they can't chase those if they've got health issues going on, or it will slow them down, as I have experienced recently with a health issue of my own. But that's why I want my kiddos healthy so that they can fully enjoy life. So you guys showed up here today as our listeners. We hope it makes you think about and take some actions about your own health, both parents and young adults. But we also hope you gain some perspective on how you can share important information that you either possess or that you come across, and how you can support each other in really awesome ways, all while honoring healthy boundaries. That becomes a big issue as your kids get older and all of a sudden you are not in charge of the health decisions that they make. And so it's learning how to have those boundaries with the kids to be able to express those boundaries, and the parents to be able to honor those, two sides of that coin. So we are not experts, we will say that every time, but we want to authentically share what we have learned in our journey as mom and son, in the hopes of making the path a little bit easier for those of you who are listening on both sides of the equation. So Kate, let's start with you. So we're going to rewind the clock. What is the earliest messages you remember hearing about health?
For sure. I think the earliest messages I remember hearing about health, obviously, there's the corny, oh, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. So I think that really kind of pushed, healthy eating and everything onto just a lot of kids my age as a child. But I think of things like in the school lunchroom, they had that little chart that had the breakdown of you're supposed to have this many vegetables and this many fruit and this protein and this much milk and all that stuff. And then obviously, PE classes and things like that in elementary school. You're running around, you're playing games, playing sports, doing stretches, all sorts of stuff. So I think that health is kind of incorporated into our society just through school and everything like that. I would say that's where most of my earliest childhood lessons about health came from. And I think that that really kind of started me into understanding about health, not saying that I necessarily listened to it and executed on it, but I think that, growing up, you did learn a lot about health, whether it was at school, at home, things like that. I mean, I remember just with us growing up, there would be times where we would go on a health kick and try new recipes or things like that, or take family walks or go to the park and run around. So I think that a lot of times health is just, especially as a kid, it's just what you do. Playing at the park, that's exercise. Your parents are cooking food for you most of the time. So that's, giving you some opportunity to make some healthy choices as the parent for your kid. So I think I had a very kind of basic understanding knowledge about health of, okay, I know I should be eating my fruits and my vegetables and I shouldn't be eating pizza rolls and Doritos and all that stuff. Again, not saying that I executed that perfectly. Growing up as a kid, I was a really picky eater. So I didn't always eat my vegetables. I didn't always, do all the healthiest things diet wise. But I think that just having those incorporated into our daily life definitely helped a lot.
And for any parents out there who have picky eaters, right, who are worried about their kids turning out okay, there's evidence right here. They're going to be fine.
Exactly. And I think that's, go ahead.
Cayd lived off of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, a Trix yogurt, some Doritos, a juice box, and an applesauce cup, like 3 meals a day for a
Mhm.
year. And he had to make those peanut butter and jelly sandwiches himself at the age of 4 because he chose not to eat the dinner that we were having as a family. What were you going to
Exactly.
say, babe?
I think that's something important as a parent that to understand is you can try to push your kid to eat vegetables, you can try to push your kid to eat whatever. And obviously, don't feed them Oreos for dinner every night. But there is kind of a certain point where as long as they're getting their nutrition and they're fine and they're not starving or they're not, having any health problems or whatever, at some point you just kind of have to learn to accept it.
Because that's a battle you can't win, right? Like that's something kids are in charge of is what they actually do eat. And I know that, from when I was growing up, knowledge has changed and shifted, but there were a lot of people that came out of childhood with eating disorders because of a direct result of the way that parents and doctors and other people in their life handled, especially like the picky eater or the overeater or the undereater, right? Like
Mhm.
there really is a lot of information out there. So I would tell parents, take a deep breath, relax, have the conversations, provide the healthy stuff. But at the end of the day, right, that is something your kid can control as young as the age of 2. Like Cayd did great eating his baby food, but the minute he turned 2, it was all about the chicken nuggets and cheese. So the healthiest versions I could find way back then in the
For
early
sure.
2000s. But so as a parent, I did my best, right? I tried to choose healthier options. I didn't know everything then that I know now. I definitely would have chosen to change a few things about our family journey. One of the things we did when I was growing up, I remember every Friday night we got a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi, which why we were drinking Pepsi, I don't know, because I'm a Coke girl all the way, Diet Coke. Very rarely now, I'm doing much better. But we would have a bag of Doritos and a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi. But that was the only time we had pop as kids in our house. My own kids didn't have pop in the house.
I
And
was
so
gonna
I
say I don't think
continued
we
that.
would have, maybe apple juice or something like that, but we never had pop
Yep.
just sitting around.
But our Friday night thing was the kid's dad would take them to pick up a movie, and usually because he was an easy target, they'd walk out with a box of candy each, and then they'd stop and get a pizza at Papa Murphy's, and we did that every Friday night for years and years and years. And so
Mhm.
I would maybe make some different choices about that candy and that pizza going forward, and rather than it maybe being every week, maybe it would be once a month. But the kids do remember that. I do remember there were years though where they no longer wanted to eat Papa Murphy's because we had had it so often. So
Mm, for
love you,
sure.
Papa Murphy's, but the kids needed a break. So I would go back and have us, take more walks as a family. Like maybe that would be something we would do every night after dinner to make that movement more of a family activity rather than me getting up in the morning and saying, "Oh, I should go on a walk," and figuring you guys were going to get enough exercise doing what you were doing. And I would like to kind of talk about too when Cayd talks about they always had the nutrition charts posted in the lunchroom at school and they always had healthy options, but it was always the kids' choice. and what they wanted to choose. And I think we know now that there is no one prescription for everyone about what good nutrition should look like. But that's where we were as a society in the early 2000s and even the 2010s. So as we go on, and Cayd talks a little bit more about his journey and how he's customized it to himself, I think it's great that he is able to make those individual choices and not just believing everything that is put out there around nutrition.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't even know if those charts still hang in the lunchroom at school. I think they probably do, but well, it changes slowly, right? It changes slowly
Uh-huh.
over time. So, but yeah, I would change a few things, but I am always about looking out the windshield, not out the rear view mirror. That's wasted energy looking back. So when you know better, you do better. And I think as a parent, also not expecting perfection out of yourself. You heard me say I would have gone down to one pizza night a month rather than one every week. Don't think about all the fun stuff and think you have to knock it out just because, but you can also make healthy stuff fun. So
For sure.
that topic of health changes so much over time, and there's so many sources of information. Sometimes I feel like it's too many, like you get bombarded and we're not really sure what to listen to or what to follow. Information's become so much more accessible with the internet. I mean, you've never known not having an internet, not having a
Yeah.
cell phone. That's, you have no concept of what that
Hmm.
was,
I
to
was
have to go open the Encyclopedia Britannica in grandma and grandpa's basement to get information. So what were you going to say?
exactly. I was kind of in that weird age group where I didn't grow up with, an iPad in my hands and always playing games and watching Netflix or whatever, like some kids are now these days. I was still playing outside as a kid. I was still, had to learn to come in when the street lights came on and all that stuff. But I also, once I got to, I don't middle school. So what is that, like
Mhm.
11, 12? Like that was when people started getting phones and things like that. So I kind of had that unique experience of having both, which, like you said, there is just so much information out there, and it can be good and it can be bad. A lot of it
Mhm.
contradicts itself. So I think, and we'll kind of dive into this later, but I think that that's something important, is that you kind of just have to do your research and look at
Yeah.
everything and, find the credible sources and figure out what works for you. Not every exercise you see on TikTok is going to, work for you. Or not every recipe you find on your healthy recipe Facebook group is going to be good. So I think that you just kind of have to use the knowledge that is provided with the internet, but also be smart about it and use the own
Mhm.
knowledge that you have in your brain and figure out what does and doesn't work for you.
Yeah, because it can for sure be contradictory and hard to wade through, right? Confusing to wade through, but
Hmm.
you have to do what rings true. So, as you've gotten older and you've taken responsibility for your own health, especially over the last, you're about to turn 21, so since you were
Hmm.
18, last 3 years, what do you take into consideration in making your decisions and deciding what to embrace and what to ignore?
For sure. So, kind of like I said, with the internet, there is a lot of information out there, which is great. It's easy to search up on Google healthy, recipes to lose weight, or healthy recipes to gain muscle, or easy exercises to grow my arms, or whatever your goal is. So, I think that using that has been really beneficial. And I definitely take that into consideration when looking at my overall health. But I also think that, again, that provides things to ignore. Not every exercise that you see is going to work for you. Not everyone wants to go run a marathon, or not everyone wants to go be a power lifter, or not everyone wants to be a bodybuilder. Not everyone wants to eat lettuce and chicken 3 days, 3 times a day for 7 days a week. Not everyone, it's all just about figuring out what works for you. And I think that that's something that I have really taken into consideration throughout my health journey. I would say over the past 2 years is when I've really gotten serious. I tried in high school and early college to, be the person that just eats brown rice and grilled chicken. And I quickly learned that that was not going to work for me. And I think that that is why myself and a lot of other people and a lot of kids my age, quote unquote, fail at the health journey, because you search, okay, what should I eat to lose weight? And it's grilled chicken and brown rice, and that's it. And that's all you eat 3 times a week. And that's just not maintainable. That's not the lifestyle I wanted to live. I still want to be able to go out to dinner with my friends. I still want to stop and get an ice cream late at night on my way home. So I think that it's important to figure out what works for you. If you want to be the person that works out 7 days a week, cool. Figure out a schedule that works for you. If you want to be the person that works out 2 days a week, cool. Figure out something that works for you. If you want to go to the gym and do super heavy, intense sessions, that's great. If you're the person that just wants to go take a 30-minute walk on your lunch break around the pond outside of your office, I think that that's great too. So I think it's really important when you're taking everything in to just consider what works best for your life.
For sure. And I think, to kind of add to the conversation, like you're not chasing a number on a scale, right?
Hmm.
So can you talk a little bit about what you are chasing as far as
For
health?
sure.
Like, is it about how you look? Is it about how you feel? It's not about the
Hmm.
number, right? We just said that, but what is it that you have in mind? Taught your goal, right? Where do you want to
Hmm.
get to? What does that look like?
I think my overall goal is, like you said, it's not a number on a scale. It's not necessarily a way that my body looks. My goal is really like, what can my body do and how can I move my body? And just a quality of life thing. And again, everyone has goals. There isn't a right or wrong thing. If you want your body to look a certain way, that's great. If you want to hit a certain number on the scale, that's great. Those just aren't my particular goals. For example, something I decided last year in 2023 that I wanted to do was I wanted to run a marathon. I ended
And
up
you were
running that
not a
marathon.
runner.
I hated running before. You could not pay me enough money to run half a mile. I was not a runner. I don't even think I owned a pair of running shoes. I was not a runner. Where that idea came from, I'm not sure. I think something might be wrong with me. But so I think that mine is definitely more about what my body can do. When I ran that marathon, I didn't care about how much I weighed, or I didn't care about how much I looked, or I didn't care or how I looked. I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted to say, okay, I am doing the workouts and nourishing my body with the right foods to be able to run this marathon. My brother lives out in the Washington, Oregon area, and there's a whole bunch of beautiful hikes that you can go on. I want my body to be able to go on those hikes. I don't want to, only be able to hike for 10 minutes and be out of breath and need a break, or, things like that. I want to be able to, when I go see my cousins and play with her kids, I want to be able to get on the ground and roll around with them. Um, and I know that that is something that a lot of older people consider is, oh, I want to be able to, like people a little bit older than you, they might be thinking, oh, I want to be able to play with my grandkids and whatever, take them to the park. But I think that it's just as important to have that mindset while you're young, because I think doing it now kind of builds the foundation. So I think that that is something that's really important to me, is being able to do the things that I want to do. And that's my goal. It's not about a weight. It's not about, oh, the way I look or anything like that.
For sure. And that's, you're ahead of the game, right? Like you said, you're addressing it now. And so it has become a lifestyle for you. And I think the consciousness and the intentionality around creating a healthy lifestyle is definitely something that has emerged as more and more important. And it really makes me feel good that people of your generation are looking at it more
Hmm.
proactively and not being like, oh my gosh, I'm 55. I better start paying attention, right? I don't have grandkids
Exactly.
yet, but when that comes, I would also like to be able to be down on the floor, rolling
Hmm.
around with them. So, and I think, important to note that when you talked about what it is you're chasing and why you're doing it, it has nothing to do with your self worth.
Hmm.
You know you're worthy of pursuing these dreams, but a number on the scale doesn't dictate how you feel about yourself. You ran a half marathon at one point and twisted an ankle, right? Early on in
Hmm.
the race. You chose to finish the race, but you didn't beat yourself up afterwards because you
Hmm.
hadn't hit your numbers, right? And so it's just really, I love the way that you're focusing on how you feel and what your body is able to do. So,
Hmm.
and your dedication to making a plan and executing it is spot on. Like I've watched this whole thing. Like I just had a
Hmm.
picture pop up. Cayd got a new job and there was a picture of him in the kitchen dressed up in his work clothes. And this was a couple of years ago. And like I look at that picture now and he was not considered overweight at that point. But then I look at who he is now after focusing on running, focusing on his nutrition planning. He does meal prep a couple times a week, dirties every dish in the kitchen, but he also unloads the dishwasher, like we talked about before. But he's really dedicated to that. So I
Hmm.
admire that a lot. How have I helped you to be able to take over ownership of your health as you've gone down this road?
For sure. I think a big thing through it has just been your support and your interest in it. Kind of like you said, I mean, just a little backstory of my just overall health journey. Throughout my whole childhood, I was always the skinny, small kid. I barely had any weight on me. I was always a little bit shorter than everyone else in my class. That was just, I could eat whatever I want and didn't gain a pound. It was all fine. And then about 17, 18 years old, obviously, everyone older than me was saying, oh, just wait till you're, not a teenager anymore. All of that's going to catch up to you. And I was like, oh, no, I'll be fine. And sure enough, it did catch up to me. So, in the span of about 6 months, I gained about 40 pounds after high school, which was the heaviest I had been. At that point in time, I wasn't working out. I worked at a restaurant and I was eating food from that restaurant. So I was eating out every day. I was eating probably 4 times the normal serving of pizza rolls. I was eating big helpings of goldfish, big helpings of ice cream, just kind of eating whatever I wanted. And something really just kind of switched in my brain about, like I said, about 2 years ago. And I was just like, I don't feel like I can go and enjoy the things I want to do. So that was really what stopped or started this health journey for me. But like I said, throughout that whole journey, you had been very supportive. When I was a little bit heavier, you never, came at me in an aggressive way of, oh, it's time to lose weight or you're getting big. I don't think you ever even actually said anything about it now that I'm thinking about it. And I think
But I
even
might
I
have
didn't even,
skipped buying the big carton of goldfish once or twice at the grocery store when you had already consumed your one for the week.
yeah, exactly. So I think just like being supportive and, when I did start meal prepping and working out, I think you were very interested in, oh, like, why are you choosing to meal prep chicken or, how are you meal prepping it? Or, what are you putting in your smoothies or blah, blah, blah. I think that just having someone who supports you and is interested and can kind of help keep you accountable, I think helps. This could either apply to a parent or a kid, no, really no matter what your age is. I think having someone that can hold you accountable is one of the best tools through a health journey. And again, the health journey doesn't need to be losing weight or it doesn't need to be getting stronger, whatever it is. If it's losing weight, if it's gaining weight, if it's you want to be mentally more healthy, if you want to, whatever it is, I think kind of voicing your goals and your aspirations, I think definitely helps. If I had never came to you and told you, okay, I want to run this marathon, you wouldn't have been checking in and saying, okay, how's your training going? What are you, how are you feeling? Blah, blah, blah. So I think that having someone to keep you accountable definitely helps.
For sure. And it's been interesting for me to watch you on the journey too and kind of watch you change things up as you've learned, what to do. You have become a very routine based individual as far
Hmm.
as your foods are concerned, but it's fun to see you decide on a Friday night after you get off work. Cayd works Pacific Coast time. He works from home, but Pacific Coast time. And he'll decide that he's going to, even though he's already eaten his meal prep for the day at like 3 o'clock, because he cuts off his eating pretty early in the day and goes to bed pretty early so that he can get up and work out in the morning. But he'll just decide on a random, he's going to go to Freddy's, which is one of his favorites, and treat
Hmm.
himself onto that meal. So it's been fun to watch how you embraced the imperfection, but yet you've still achieved your goals. So
For
that's
sure.
been inspiring for me. I could never be that ritualistic or that routine about, me, I will eat a leftover one time and then don't let me look at
Hmm.
it again for 2 months. Right. So I'm all about the new recipes and trying all of those, but it has really helped me. Now when I'm cooking a recipe, I'm planning enough for lunch the next day and maybe one other time later in the
Hmm.
week, things like that.
And
So that's great.
I think that goes into, again, finding what works for you. I'm the kind of person I can eat the same meal 5 times in a row for dinner. I have made a smoothie every morning for breakfast for almost 2 years. It just, that doesn't bother me. Being that routine person doesn't bother me, but that's something that you like. If you tried to do that, you probably wouldn't be successful in your health journey because it's
Yeah.
just not what works for you. So I think that that's a great example of really
Yeah.
like what works for me isn't going to work for you and isn't going to work for everyone.
Yeah, and Cayd hasn't only had to learn about health, he's had to learn more about cooking. He was always a baker, not a chef. And so
Hmm.
he's had to learn about like how does he want to make all these different lean meats and cook them up. And he's really become a pro on his Blackstone, and his rice is seasoned just right and his potatoes are really delicious. So it's not like he's eating basic boring food all the time.
Hmm.
He really has upped the meal prep game. So that's been fun to watch. What would you tell parents about boundaries? So we talked about how I can support you, but boundaries, I just
Hmm.
want to kind of put a definition on this. So the boundary, if you put up a boundary, it's not about what the other person has to change or do for you, but it's about what you will do, right? If they cross a boundary. So
Hmm.
as a kiddo, what would you tell parents about boundaries their child might put up?
I
Yeah.
would kind of like you said, I feel like it's really important to listen to the boundaries that your kids set up and respect those. Whether it's you've tried to tell them they need to eat healthier and they've said, "Mom or Dad or whoever, I don't really care. Like I'm just gonna eat whatever I want." As hard as it can be as a parent to watch your kid do that, and obviously if it gets to the point where they're causing their body major harm, I think that that's a different story. But if they're gaining a little weight because they decide to eat a bag of Doritos after school or whatever, I think that it's important to respect that boundary and kind of let them learn their own way. I think with a lot of things in life, if you try to tell someone, oh, you need to lose weight, or oh, you need to exercise more, or oh, you need to get better mentally, or whatever the situation is. I think a lot of times that actually deters people from solving the problems because it feels like,
Mhm.
oh, well, I don't want to lose weight, but my mom says I need to lose weight, or my dad says I need to lose weight. So now I'm not going to. And especially, I think when you have like a teenager, young adult kid, speaking from a child's perspective, it's easy to get in that mindset of, not wanting to listen to your parents and thinking, oh, I'm an adult, I can make my own decisions. So I think that it's important to, as long as your kid is not majorly harming themselves, to just respect them and let them find their own way along the journey and do what you can within the boundaries they've set. But at some point, you kind of just have to accept that they are an adult and they can make their own decisions.
And setting good examples, of course, right? Like kids learn through examples. Parents can talk to their blue in the face, but it's going to mean
Hmm.
more if they see their parent taking good care of themselves. So it is really hard for parents to let go of this one as kids get older. But I think you can even start, if there's anyone listening who has kids who are a little bit younger, like it is very easy to offer your 7-year-old two healthy choices and let them make the choice, between two healthy options. Because obviously, if you hold out the Twix bar and the lettuce, you know what most kids are going to choose. Not all kids, but most kids are going to choose
Hmm.
the Twix bar. Some of that is just due to messaging they see in society, right? And so I think if you offer them two healthy choices and they get used to making their own choices, and then they also get used to the outcomes of their choices, right? So boundaries, for instance, one of the boundaries that we've come across recently. So Cayd has allergy induced asthma, or at least he was diagnosed with that as a kid. We live near Wichita, Kansas, which is the allergy capital of the world. And now this kid has decided he is a runner. So he is out in the middle of allergy season running, and he has a maintenance inhaler. And as we've progressed to him taking care of his health, I kept getting reminders from the pharmacy because for whatever reason, the pharmacy's software can't figure out how to send a text message to Cayd about the fact that he needs to deal with his maintenance inhaler, but it comes to me. So at first I was reminding him like every time I got the text message. And then I was like, I had actually written it on my calendar, remind Cayd about maintenance inhaler. And then one day it dawned on me, I'm like, this really isn't my responsibility anymore. This kid is 21 almost. And, he needs to be responsible for dealing with this prior authorization issue with the inhaler. And so I said to him, do you want me to continue to remind you to go pick up your inhaler? Do you need that from me? And what did you tell me?
I said no. And you have still continued to remind me, but definitely not as often. So I think that, like you said, that it's just, whether it's eating, whether it's a prescription, whether it's whatever, I think kind of like you said, you just have to realize this is not my responsibility. I haven't had my maintenance inhaler for a couple months and I've been fine without it. So that's something that I've made a choice, whether or not you may
Mhm.
think it's right or wrong. I've made a choice to just not get my maintenance inhaler. And again, not saying that that is the best choice or the right choice, but that's a choice that I've made.
Yeah, and you can outgrow asthma, right? And so you're doing a good test of that right now. But this is a perfect example of boundaries. Cade says, I have reminded him, I have dialed it back, but yet this podcast is yet another reminder. But if he got the doctor to say that he doesn't need the inhaler anymore, his mommy would feel better about it. But again, it's not my responsibility, right? So he's taking ownership of the choices that he's making and also the outcome it produces. And so this is just one example of how you can ask your child how you can support them. And then remember that they are, in fact, responsible for their own outcomes. And it's not on you to try to control that or to try to manipulate that to get the outcome that you want. So, and it is a process. So things like knowing when to go to the doctor, like how sick do you have to be? What does an annual visit look like? Things as a mom or a dad that you've always just done for them, how to navigate their insurance, how to select and afford healthy foods, honoring their bodies, what does rest look like? All of those things, like those are discussions, really healthy discussions that you can have with them. You don't wait till the house is on fire to have the discussion about how to escape the house, right? So you're not going to wait until your child is, you know, in the middle of, give me an example, Cayd, in the middle of
Like an asthma attack. If I,
an asthma attack, yeah,
yeah.
to then say, oh, well, you should have probably picked up that maintenance inhaler, right? Like I've reminded Cayd, so he knows if something does happen, I'm not going to feel guilty about it. because
Hmm.
I did my due diligence, and then I gave him the ownership for what is truly his to hold. So that is really about strong and healthy boundaries. So again, don't wait till the house is on fire. Have those conversations ahead
For
of
sure.
time.
So speaking of that, kind of along with that example and just anything else, was it difficult? You kind of talked about the adjustment of me kind of taking ownership over my health, whether that's making my own doctor's appointments, choosing my own foods, all that sort of stuff. How has that change been? Is that difficult? Is it hard to kind of give up that quote unquote control?
Yeah, I think the hardest part is just, and this is the same, we talked about it kind of in the moving out episode, but it's like to just not have to have it on your mental radar. Parents carry a lot, and typically moms in our society carry a lot of just emotional baggage when it comes to their kids. So that's not just, when does my child need to go to their well exam? Oh, I really need to make sure that they've got their vaccinations. It's also, oh my gosh, their shoes are wearing out. What new size do they need? Do they have a winter jacket? When are conferences? Is there a birthday party that's coming up? Like, parents just carry a lot of heavy emotional weight. And so when something is taken off your plate, like your child's health and their decisions, and they're now responsible for it, sometimes it is hard to just let that go. And I've had friends say to me, well, I don't think my kid at college is drinking enough water. And I'm thinking to myself, as someone who's got 3 kids that are to this point, you know I would be worried about bigger things, because hopefully by the time your child has got to college, you have told them how important it is to hydrate, right? But it's their
Hmm.
choice whether or not they do it. And the outcome could be that they get dehydrated, but that's a lesson they're going to learn. So yeah, it is hard to just not have those concerns in your daily orbit for parents to do that. So I think it was a little easier for me with you, because this is my third trip around the sun
Hmm.
on this particular topic. But don't think your 25, almost 26-year-old brother doesn't still get reminders about going to the eye doctor or the dentist or what that might be.
Hmm.
I'm anticipating that eventually that will just go away, because I do trust you guys to figure that out. I know one of the things that we're still working through is how to figure out insurance and doctor's bills and things like that,
Hmm.
and what that looks like, and that, yeah, you probably do need to have enough money in savings to cover your deductible and things like that. What is an FSA? What is an HSA? Kind of all of those things that as young adults you're needing to learn. But
Hmm.
otherwise, I think I've pretty much just kind of let go of that piece.
For
I
sure.
invite you to eat dinner with us when I'm making stuff that I know you particularly like, or if I think there's something you might be interested in.
Hmm.
Sometimes you sit down with your meal prep with us, but I think there's a lot of parents that would have trouble with, my child is not sitting at the table and eating dinner with us every night, even though they're living in my house. And
Yeah.
so it's being flexible around a lot of things, which we've talked about before. But even when it comes to this health stuff, I don't know much about some of the supplements that you kids take, some of your, pre-workout stuff. And
Hmm.
that's why I ask questions about what are you putting in that smoothie? Hey, do I need to learn
Uh-huh.
about that? Is that something that could help me? So yeah, it hasn't been as difficult with you as with your siblings, but I know that a lot of parents do struggle about this one.
Hmm.
So what would you tell a parent who's concerned about their young adult's health? Like, how would you approach it, or how could they approach it where it might
Hmm.
hit better if they have a concern?
For sure. I think the best way to approach it, at least what works for me or for us, is kind of like you talked about with like certain supplements or things like that, is you just asking, oh, what are you meal prepping this week? Or, oh, why are you putting that in your smoothie? Or what's the difference between this pre-workout and that pre-workout? Or, kind of coming at it from like a question standpoint, kind of what you talked about earlier with like your college kid not drinking enough water. If that's something you're concerned about, I think just bringing it up more of in a casual conversation of just saying like, oh, is there, any places to fill up your water bottle? Or are you still bringing your water bottle around with you while you go to campus? Or, if they're older and they have a job, how are you drinking water at your job, or blah, blah, blah. I think that coming at it from a point of interest and like a question and almost like you're more curious about it is a better approach. And I think sometimes too, as the child in your answer, sometimes that might kind of make you pause and question. If your
Hmm.
parents asking you, oh, like, what benefits does that pre-workout have? I might stop and think, I haven't thought about the benefits of this pre-workout. Like, what am I putting in my body? Or if it's, oh, you know what? I actually am not drinking enough water now that I think about it. So I think that that's a good way to approach it versus if you come at it with a, you're not drinking enough water, or you shouldn't be taking this supplement, or you shouldn't be eating that, or you shouldn't be doing this exercise. I think especially as a young adult, that can come off aggressive and put us
Mhm.
in defense mode already. But I mean, as a parent, have you saw anything that you have found has worked, or the best way to approach things, or how would you recommend parents to approach
Yeah.
that?
I think it's really about curiosity, not judgment. So I think kids, young adults especially, they feel a lot of judgment coming from their parents just innately. It's kind of where they're at in their development, even if their relationship with their parent has not necessarily been judgmental. To that point, when they're out and they're fresh at making all of their new decisions and designing a life and a lifestyle that they love, like if you hear the person who's supposed to love you most in the world coming at you in a negative way, or it sounds very different, like, oh well, why do you take pre-workout, like what does that do for you, versus I don't understand why you kids are taking that pre-workout, we never did that when we would go work out. Like those are two
Hmm.
very different approaches, and so I think it's
For
really that
sure.
curiosity over the judgment, because you might not agree with what your child is doing, but if you are judging them for their choices, that's about you. That's not about them. And that is
Hmm.
the fastest way to create a big old wall between you and your child. And then they're going to quit talking to you. They're going to quit telling you stuff because they don't want to feel judged.
Hmm.
Accurate?
For sure. I agree.
Yeah. Do you see some of your friends struggling with autonomy over their health as they've gotten older? Like, is their mom still making all the phone calls to make their appointments, or buying them all their junk food, or, doing things that essentially keep control over their child's health, right?
Hmm.
And don't put the onus on their kid to take charge.
I would say I see kind of it on all ends of the spectrum. I have some friends whose parents still, make their doctor's appointments and call in and refill their prescriptions for them and different things like that. I also have some friends who their parents kind of just don't really care about their health, and it's just kind of on their own. They don't, encourage them to go get an annual visit or go to the eye doctor or whatever. And I think then I also have some people who have a healthy balance of, your parents kind of checking in on your health, but also not pushing you too far. So I think that it kind of is on a spectrum. And I think it just depends on the relationship that you have with your child. I
Hmm.
know some of the parents and friends that I know that do still kind of have that quote unquote control over their medical stuff. That's just what works for them. The parents don't mind calling, and again, not saying that either one is right or wrong, but the parents don't mind calling and making their appointments, or calling and refilling their prescriptions, or telling them what to eat, or blah blah blah. And I have some kids my age whose parents kind of don't really care about their medical stuff, and they've done a great job of maintaining it, or they've just kind of not really cared and figured it out on their own. So I think that I definitely see it across the spectrum, and not saying that either one is right or wrong, but I definitely do see some kids struggle with it
Hmm.
depending on how their parents have reacted to it.
And how would you encourage those kids regarding taking charge of their own health journey? What would you
For
suggest to
sure.
them?
I think if you are in a situation where your parents might be a little overbearing and, making everything, all your doctor's appointments and all that sort of stuff, I think it kind of is, you just hit a certain point in your life where you're ready to maintain that. You don't want to have to call your mom to then call the dentist to then tell them you have a cavity. It just gets to the point where it's easier. You might move out of state, or you might, the different things like that. If you're currently living with them and then you move out, obviously they're not still buying your groceries. They're not still, doing all that stuff. So I think that it's important to really just kind of have that conversation of, and I know we've had this conversation before of, hey mom, like, can you help me look at this medical bill and figure
Hmm.
out what's going on and why do I owe them this and blah, blah, blah. So I think that, again, kind of coming at it with a curiosity mindset of, how do I make a doctor's appointment if you don't know how? Or how do I call my insurance? Or what should I be eating? And I think also too, it's hard sometimes if kids, I know some people too who their parents don't go to the doctor. Even as a kid, obviously they might have taken them to their, original pediatrician appointments and stuff like that when they were little kids. But I have some friends who just, they don't go to the doctor regularly because their parents don't, or they just eat whatever their parents, cook for dinner, and it's not necessarily healthy and it's not necessarily bad. It's just what they do. So I think that it definitely is a conscious decision that you have to make for yourself. And I think as a parent, you can't force your kid to make that decision. And I think as a kid, you just have to take your own responsibility for it.
Yeah, and it can get tricky, especially with, like, our insurance laws and the way they work. I'm really blessed because you guys all have full-time jobs that offer health insurance, right? And you're in your early 20s. But there are a lot of kids who are working part-time jobs or still in school, and so they are on their parents' insurance. And some kids don't want their parents all up in their own medical business, right? And so the parents, because of laws, like, cannot necessarily see the claim forms, but they see the bills come across. And so that can become a really uncomfortable conversation. And so I think, again, have the conversation before the house is on fire if you are a family that finds
Hmm.
yourself in that situation, for sure. So we've talked a little bit about how your health and habits have changed over the last couple of years.
Hmm.
We've talked about your priorities, right? What they look like. And so going forward for you, let's say you're looking 6 months out. What's your health focus right now?
For sure. I think my health focus is still just to kind of enjoy life. I would like to continue running, like to continue working out, lifting weights, eating healthy, and just making sure my body feels good. I've got some travel I want to do coming up, being able to go on hikes and run at the beach and swim in the ocean and all that stuff. I think that that is definitely my big motivation right now for the near future.
Awesome. And I am so proud of how you've improved your health. And it's really inspired me to do more. So, we're going to talk about the parent's journey on our next episode, including how it affects their child. I think that that is a really important discussion to have as well,
For
because even
sure.
though the kids don't have any control over you, it does still affect them.
And as a kid, like you said, I think that your kids' habit or your parents' habits do affect you. At a young age, obviously, if your parents are eating healthy and they're cooking healthy dinners, then in turn you're eating healthy dinners. If they're cooking not healthy dinners, then you're eating not healthy dinners. If your parents aren't super active, you're likely not going to be super active. So I think that at a young age, it is important for parents to recognize that their behaviors and their actions and their lifestyle does affect their children. And then in turn, in an older age, once you do have young adult kids, it doesn't affect us as much. I'm able to make my own decisions as far as what I do for activity, as far as what I eat, as far as what I do for my mental health and things like that. So it doesn't directly affect me. However, I still have to be around and experience that. If your parents are getting older and they're not eating healthy and they're not getting movement in and their mental health isn't the best, that affects their life, and that can be hard to watch as a kid, especially as your parents get into that older age. So I think that that's something to acknowledge too. um, but is there any other hot topics you want to talk about being a parent, different things that might have come up throughout our childhood, whether that's health or wellness or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I do have, one thing I'd like to talk about on that, but I want to piggyback on what you just said first. When you were saying it can be hard on a kid to watch their parents struggling, right? If their habits are not the best as you see your parents age. And that even goes for kids who are middle age watching their parents who are struggling and trying to help them through and navigate some things, because there's the whole sandwich generation concept, right? We've got kids we're caring for, but we also have aging parents, and wanting to help them navigate and extend their lives as long as possible with the highest level of quality of life that we possibly can. So wanted to piggyback that and say that. But the
For
hot
sure.
topics for kids and health, I think, that changes, I think, with every generation of kids that come through. I think a really big one, back in the day when I went through school, there was the DARE program regarding drugs. And it was just, you stay away from all drugs. And then now, we have weed legal in a lot of states in the United States. And so the conversation around drugs, alcohol, vaping came out when my kids were in junior high and high school. And that was really a struggle because that was something I didn't know anything about. That was a really
Hmm.
hot topic among my parent group, with the administrators and teachers at schools, with the people who were leading your extracurricular activities, was how to handle vaping with kids. And it is still around, right? And so those conversations are important. When your kids have a genetic cocktail or predisposition to certain things, right? It is so important to be telling them about the risks that they carry from the time they're little, so that even if they are making choices, let's use alcohol as an example, if they have family members who are alcoholics, they need to know that they have that genetic predisposition in their family. And so that maybe they can make lifestyle choices or at least be aware of what to watch for. So those hot topics, I think those are just examples of what I handled with my kids, given, where we were coming from and the time at which we were dealing with it. But again, that judgment, not curiosity, because there were a lot of parents that went in guns blazing after vapes, and they were rifling through their kids' backpacks and through their kids' cars and through their closets and through their, cabinets, and trying to figure out if their kid was doing this rather than sitting down and having a simple discussion. And there wasn't a lot of information out there about what vaping can do to kids
Hmm.
or even young adults now that are continuing to do it. But again, those are their choices and there will be repercussions. And this doesn't look any different than when, it was very popular for people to smoke back in the 60s and 70s. So they made
Hmm.
choices as young adults that have had repercussions as they've
For
gotten
sure.
older. We would love to be able to prevent our kids from having any hardship in the future because of choices that they make as a parent. That's just an innate piece, but we need to understand that that's part of your kids pulling away. They're supposed to do that. They're supposed to pull away from you and supposed to make their
Hmm.
own decisions, and that's included in health.
And
So
exactly. I think, like you said, it's important to have those open conversations, like kind of on the topic of vaping. I remember growing up, like you said, that came out like when I was in middle school, high school. And I remember we would have conversations about, what vaping can do and just how, it's super unknown. And yeah, it sounds like, oh, there's this Laffy Taffy flavor vape and it sounds so cool and whatever. But I think that it's important just to have those conversations so that way, as a child, you're educated about it. And like you said, at the time, there wasn't really much about education about vapes, about what it could do, what it, obviously it hadn't been around long enough to see the lasting effects on it. But I think having those conversations definitely helped me to better understand it. And I think also then created an open door for me to come talk to you about it. If I was somewhere around vapes or if I had started vaping or if whatever the case had been, I think that knowing that we had had that conversation about it definitely made me a lot more comfortable with it rather than, saying, oh, I haven't heard about this vape thing, let me try it and let me hide it from my mom. And then, she's going to go through
mhm.
my room and then blah, blah, blah. So I think really having that open communication and the conversation, whether it's vape, whether it's alcohol, whether it's, just anything in general, I think having that open conversation definitely helps
Yeah, and proactive, right? Not when you find
for
the vape
sure.
in your child's pocket when you're doing the laundry. Although my kids were also doing their own laundry from the time they were in about first grade, so I wouldn't have found it anyway. But so thank you for your willingness, Cayd, today to be vulnerable and talk about your health journey. It'll be my turn next time to talk about my health journey a little bit. Thank you to our listeners for coming back for more Raising Bigs. We hope that you found our chat valuable, and we encourage you to forward along to anyone else you think could benefit from listening. You can find the podcast anywhere podcasts are hosted, and you can communicate with us on all the socials. We will put that in the show notes, but you can find the easiest way to get to me is marcyhawkinson.com. You can message me right there. So, Cayd, want to take
For
it away
sure.
and close us out today?
Yes. For your parents or for the parents out there, I would say just, send your kids a text today. Tell them you love them, tell them you're here to have those conversations, whether they're difficult, whether they're easy, whether you guys have that communication or not. I think that that's very important. And to all the kids out there, I would say definitely do the same. Let your parents know that you care about them, care about their health, you care about their well being, and just keep them updated on your own. But I think that that's it. And we will see you guys next time on the next episode of Raising Bigs.
Thanks, Cayd. Love you.
Love you too.